You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I have to confess, the term enemy here always brings to my mind scenes from detective shows like Law and Order. Inevitably, when a homicide has taken place, the detective interviewing the family or friend says something to the effect of, "Did she have any enemies?" The word seems overly dramatic, like nemesis or archvillain, as if in our daily lives we're engaging in clashes on a grand scale. Mind you, these conflicts do exist, and I don't for an instant mean to diminish the very real struggles with which some of our brothers and sisters contend on a daily basis. But if enemy seems a little too intense to describe folks with whom we find ourselves in conflict, what other words might we use? What term can we apply that might ring truer for us today? Antagonist? Provoker? Adversary? What about imagining your enemy as broken, hurting, damaged, misguided, perhaps? Just changing the words changes our perception of whom we're describing, doesn't it? You see, in this section of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus interprets the centuries-old law to again call us to be holy, to be righteous as God's people were ever meant to be, to stand apart from a world seeking retribution for wounds and oppressions, and instead to love those who persecute us, and perhaps more importantly, to pray for them. It is entirely possible, after all, to love someone simply by choosing to not engage in hurtful actions or vitriolic rhetoric. But to actively pray for the person, that requires intention and effort and willingness. This subject of praying for our enemies came up a few months ago in our Monday afternoon Bible study at St. John's. One of my favorite attendees said that he prayed for his enemies. And when I asked what he prayed, he said, "I pray that God will make them stop being so terrible." I think we can all understand these kinds of prayers, but I have a hunch that Jesus is calling us to something more here. Listen again. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. It's that last little bit that affirms that Jesus, like the author of Leviticus, is inviting us into a deeper understanding of who we are, to whom we belong, and why we must respond in a way discordant with the rest of the world. We are children of the Most High God, the God whose love began this whole enterprise, and the God people will expect to glimpse in us. We're the ones on the hook, my friends. We're the hands and feet of Christ in this world. The ones who, through our love and our words and our actions, reflect God. So perhaps praying for God to reach in and change the personality of a person is not quite the best prayer we can offer for our enemies. Try as I might, I know I have never had the experience of my prayers affecting somebody in that way. What I have experienced, however, is prayer changing me. When I really take the time to pray for a person who, for whatever reason, provokes unkindness or anger in me, I find myself becoming curious about the person. Why are they that way? What is happening? to behave like that? Do they have old wounds informing their words and actions? Are they caught up in a system they can't control? Once I begin asking these questions, I invariably begin to feel compassionate for them, and my heart softens a bit. Before I know it, I'm praying for their good, for healing and peace. I'm praying they experience love and mercy and kindness in their lives. And little by little, I am ever so slowly, just the teeniest bit, changed. Mind you, it doesn't mean it's all sweetness and light between us from that point forward, lovely as that would be. Rather, it means my impression of the person has changed. Instead of being snagged by animosity and nastiness, I can honestly view them with a little more grace and empathy than I once did. And I pray the same grace might be given to me, because along with all those other questions around their motives, I have to ask myself why their behavior is bothering me so much. Do I feel insecure when they're around? Are their words intentionally cruel, or could I be personalizing something that really doesn't concern me at all? Am I reacting on behalf of another? We can't ever fully know the intentions of other people, and sometimes people are just plain wicked. Sometimes the actions of others bring actual harm to those in their sphere. Let me be clear. We are not called to justify wickedness and pretend everything is okay when it clearly isn't. We are all charged with speaking up when real injury is a possibility, and none of us should willingly abide abuse in any form. However, when we can offer a prayer for a broken child of God, when we can release a damaged person from our own soul-destroying hatred, we are more able to fully and freely live into the holiness and the love that God calls us to. Today is the 7th of 8 Sundays in Epiphany. We will soon find ourselves smack dab in the middle of Lent, the season we typically set aside for reflection, self-examination, and preparation for Holy Week and Easter. What can today's lessons teach us about how to enter into our Lenten observations? Might our Lent this year be richer if we really did pray for our enemies? Goodness knows we have recently been given a lot of opportunity to make the attempt. Our world today seems less certain and more divisive than it has been in recent memory. And friends may find themselves estranged from one another as never before. What would happen if we chose not to engage in battles on Facebook, and instead made it a point to bless every person with whom we disagree each night before bed? Don't for a moment believe that your individual time praying in the presence of the divine has no effect on the state of the world. It absolutely does. No, it may not change policies or prevent physical walls from being built, but it will prevent your heart from being walled off. It will allow the one who loves you best to shine through every moment of your life. And people will know when they see you that they are catching a glimpse of God's own self being manifest in his child. Many of Jesus' instructions from the Sermon on the Mount seem impossible. They are as contrary to our world as they were to those in first century Palestine. But they speak to a truth we recognize deep inside when we see it in our world. Whenever we hear of love conquering is deserved, whenever we see peaceful responses to violence and graciousness upon the most despised, we know we are encountering the Holy One. The one who turns the logic of our world upside down and inside out. The same one who will love us as we try, who will love us as we fall short, and who will love us even as we get back up and try again.